Alright, so before we get into doing a bit of turbo tractor work on the patrol, we've got a big announcement, and as you can see, we got some merch.
We have finally pulled our fingers out and got some merch sorted out. So this took a long time. A lot of designing went into it, a lot of dealing with printers and everything, but finally we've got our own Aussie Arvos t-shirts and hoodies. So essentially,
on the back you've got 85 iconic four-wheel drive locations, and most importantly, not one city.
No, exactly right. So we've got everywhere from Talangi up to bloody Five Rocks, Kakadu. 85 of them. So we spent a lot of time getting this geologically accurate as well. So I mean, you can really navigate off this, I reckon.
You've got the guys in Tassie.
Probably wouldn't recommend you plan a trip. You try not to follow this, you might end up
do it.
I'm going to start ticking off all locations.
Yeah, I'm going to get a highlighter and
mark them off.
Yeah, that's
so we've got basically 3 colors. We've got an olive, we've got a black, and we've got a navy. And then we've also got these hoodies. So the hoodies are so good. Like, these are genuinely super high quality hoodies. They're bloody warm, and I love them.
I want one on mine now because I'm freezing.
Yeah, no.
Very cold.
And essentially how we're going to do this, we're going to do a 2-week pre-order period, because it's really hard to work out what sizes all you guys are and how much we actually want. Like, I don't know who actually going to buy the merch, so we decided to do a pre-order period. So you got 2 weeks from the 4th of July, which is today, to put in your order. And then essentially after that 2 weeks is up, we'll place the order for all the merch, we'll get it out, and we'll get it all shipped out to you guys personally. So that's how we're going to do it. I know you don't want to get it straight away, but it would really support us and help us if you could pre-order your stuff during this pre-order period, because simply we're just not going to have the stock after that pre-order period.
Yeah, we want to make sure that none of you guys miss out. So we don't know who our audience is really, so it might turn out if we had to buy stock ourselves, who knows, we might not get enough of a size, but this way everyone gets what they want. You don't have to worry about missing out. So
exactly.
Not to forget the boys are handling all the shipping on this themselves.
Yeah. We're gonna be busy.
They're gonna be busy.
Yeah. So AussieArvos.com.au. Head over to the site now. All the merch is up there, ready for you to buy. So yeah, I'd love it if you could support us. It means the world to us, and we just absolutely love making YouTube videos. And the past year and a half been doing this has been some of the best times. Like, honestly, yeah. So appreciate you all, and now enjoy the video.
Cheers. Alright, so today is the big day for the patrol. Well, the start of a few big days, I suppose. We're finally putting a turbo on it, which many of you have been waiting for, and so have I. As you can see here, we've got various different components. I'll just run you through what we're working with. So, pretty much putting on a factory turbo setup from a factory turbo TD42. So that just involves a H13 turbo, got the stock manifold, stock crossover pipe, stock airbox, water lines, things like that. I know a lot of people say that the H13s don't bother with them because they're a waste of time. A lot of people do say that, but for the application, which is just giving it a bit of a boost, like nothing crazy, and I don't want it to be some crank snapping torque monster or anything like that. It's just gonna be a good little pick-me-up, I suppose. Yeah, so I got all the GU stuff secondhand. So I got the turbo with a dump, airbox, manifold, crossover, some intake piping, and a few water lines and that. I got that all for like 500 bucks, which I feel like is a pretty good deal for pretty much everything good to go. And then pretty much I've just had to go out and source a few other things. So I've got a bunch of fittings. These are things for like oil drains, oil feeds, water lines, things like that, different T-pieces, stuff like that. I've got braided hoses to suit the oil feeds. I've got return hoses. I've got a bunch of new exhaust manifold studs because we have a couple of snapped ones, so they're all going to have to, or a few of them, well, they're all going to be replaced, but a few of them will have to be replaced. I've got turbo studs from the turbo to the manifold. We've got new washers, we've got gaskets, and also have new sump gasket because we will be taking the sump off to put a oil drain into it. And then also got a gauge set up, so it's pretty much like a digital multi-gauge, but we'll run through that in more detail later. So for now, the first job of this whole process is going to be taking the sump off. So we've already got the oil draining, and then once that's pretty much drained, I'm just going to start undoing our sump bolts. And so that's sort of going to be the first mission. So let's just get straight into it.
That's what makes it go.
Yeah, that's what makes it go. Alright, so as you can see, sump's out of the car, just giving it a cleanup obviously needs to be nice and clean before we drill a hole for the return drain. Obviously want it to be clean before we put it back in the car as well. So yeah, just degreaser away. It came out pretty easy. Sometimes they can get stuck if they'd been like put back on with gasket maker. This just had the original gasket in it, which is just like a, I don't know what material it is, but it literally just pops straight off, which is easy. So pretty much we're going to be putting the fitting in between these two holes and as high as we can. So obviously between the holes so you can get the nuts back in, and then as high as we can so that you have where the drain comes into the sump. You don't want that sitting below the oil level ideally, because then that can cause poor flow from the turbo oil drain. So yeah, if you have it the highest you can get it, you want it out of the sump level, out of the oil level for the sump, and then that way it'll just feed in freely, sort of thing. Alright, so this is pretty much the setup we're going for the oil return. So we've just got a 3/4 inch barb, and then we've got a fitting that we're going to braze into the sump. So obviously this is one way you can do it. A lot of people do like a spike method where you punch a spike through and then screw in your fitting and use like a sealer, like Araldite. And yes, that does work. Like most of the time it's fine, but there is the risk of when you spike and when you thread that in, any sort of swarf or stuff that'll come off will go into your sump. So, and I'd say it probably isn't as good a sealant as a weld, but a lot of people do it and it works, but I'm just choosing to do this method, so. In. Yeah, so we're going to braze it in, which I'm pretty sure it's just a certain type of welding or like soldering that you use for like brass fittings and things like that, I'm pretty sure. I'm not doing it because I don't know how to do it, so we've got a friend doing it. Definitely a good idea having that as opposed to just the bar. Alright, so we're just waiting for the bit we just brazed in to cool. So while that's cooling, I'm just gonna go around and clean up the bottom of the block. So that pretty much just entails going around and getting all this gasket off. Alright, so I've cleaned the sump out. So as you can see, it's all free of everything. It's nice and clean, very good. We've got the fittings in, it's all pulled down now, so that's in there min-as. So I'm just going to give it a quick hit of some black spray paint. I don't know if this is high temp or anything, I don't know, it's just black spray paint, but it'll do. It's going to be sick. I'm servicing the car at the same time as because I'm changing the oil, and it's due for a new fuel filter, so fuel filter is getting changed while we're here. So while we've got the oil filters and fuel filter out, I'm just quickly getting to where the oil pressure sender is, or oil pressure sensor, I think, or whatever it's called. Pretty much I've got to put a T-piece in there because for my gauges I'm going to be adding an oil pressure sensor where the factory oil pressure gauge is, just for your light. I'm pulling that out, putting a T-piece in, and then that's where we'll add our own sensor. But yeah, the main reason I'm doing it now is because while the filters are off and the fuel filter's out, it's easy to get to. So, and I want to be able to chuck the oil filters back on so those ports don't get any dust or anything in them. So yeah, we're just taking that off now. So this is the fitting that I got for the T-piece. So it's the thread for the factory sensor is a 1/8 BSP T. So that's what I've got here, T-piece with the 1/8 BSP T, and then it's got a port for a 1/8 BSP T on the end where our factory sensor will go, and then it's got an NPT port for my aftermarket sensor. So we'll screw this in and then we'll put the factory one back in, and then when we go around to doing all our gauges, I'll put the aftermarket sensor in here as well. Yeah, so, yeah.
What were you reading?
Whether to use a liquid gasket as well as a gasket, or just like a gasket on its own, because it is a genuine one, so. Yeah, so for the sump, we're not going to use gasket goo, pretty much because, as the manual states, and because I you know, didn't cheap out, I went and got a genuine gasket. This should be adequate to seal the sump. I shouldn't need to use any gasket material, so we're not going to. And it makes it easier if the sump's ever got to come off again. So I've made sure I've cleaned the surfaces, so we should just be able to sit this on.
Yeah. Should. In the front?
Yep. It all looks all good my side.
I'm going to get them all in loose, and then I can do the torque. Alright, so when you're doing up the It's more important when you're using a gasket, but it's still important when you're using goo as well, or like a gasket maker. So pretty much, it works the same as like a head when you're putting on head bolts. So you want to work from the middle, tighten up at the middle first, and then work your way out. And it's sort of like, as I said to Patrick before, it's like when you stick a sticker on your car, you put the center in first, and then you spread out to either side, and it pushes any air bubbles out, and that way you get everything contacted. Where if you were to start with the outsides and push towards the middle, you might be left with a little air, like a little ridge in the middle. And so it's the same principle. You want to tighten from the middle and work your way out. That way it flattens it out all the way along, and you get the best seal because you don't want any gaps in between the sump and the block. So all that for a bit of pipe in the sump. All right, so sump is back on, all done. So glad to have that job finished, because that should be the messiest job. That's the only time I really have to crawl around heaps under the car. So now with that done, I'll just quickly chuck the oil filters and fuel filter back on, just cover up all those ports. Then the next job will be tearing all this down. All right, so we've just taken off the air box and the intake piping. I'm gonna take off that pre-filter as well, quickly do that. So apparently the idea with this air box, which we will soon find out, is that apparently it bolts straight in. So if you look here, where it was, my thing was fixed at 3 points, there, and there, but there's all these other holes which weren't being used, and I'm guessing because these have like bolts on the end as opposed to like screwing in from down above. I'd say that's where these holes are gonna go. So it should literally just slot straight in. Yeah, so this airbox is the factory airbox from a GU TD42. I think it's the same as a ZD30. Not 100% sure. I think maybe the lids can be slightly different, but this is yeah, out of a 4.2. Oh, it looks like it will fit. It's obviously not down all the way. Is that in? I think so. Yeah, that's in. Look at that, straight bolt in. Not bad, Nissan. Not bad. Yeah, so obviously got a new air filter. Obviously got it to suit the GU box. Goes in that way, like that. That's my air box. Yeah, it's gonna be fun trying to get it. All right, now we can see all our snap studs. Oh, it's in the worst position. It's gonna be so annoying. So I got one snapped stud there, as you can see, and the other one is in the worst possible spot, this bottom back corner. Oh, jeez. Yeah, so it's gonna be a pain in the ass. Excuse the language, but it's gonna be. There she is. Manifold off. You see how there's been an exhaust leak, so it's soot around there. Yeah. Nuts. One snap stud there, that's another one down there. So very fun. All right, so the next sort of step, I've got to get the studs out. Just gonna do the double nut and go around, and hopefully none of them snap. Hopefully they all come free. I'll probably try, like, you can, I've heard of people saying, like, I don't know if it's more grub screws or if it just works with anything. You can like knock them, and it's sort of like if you shock them, you can like shock the threads and stuff. If there's any like rust or corrosion or whatever, if you give them a shock, it can sometimes break that sort of bond, I suppose. But yeah, we'll pretty much just go around double nut and the ring spanner, and we'll try to remove all these. Hopefully they'll come out, fingers crossed. You know how much easier of a job this would be if you didn't have any snap studs. Pull off, clean the faces, turbo manifold on. Because they're all coming out easy though, I feel like as long as we can get the easy out in, they should come out no worries. It's just a matter of getting the easy out in there. Now we're getting a drill in there. All right, last intact stud out. Because we've got those couple studs left that have to come out with like an easy out, but I'm not 100% confident in doing that myself, so we've got a mate who's gonna give us a hand. But in the meantime, we've got to get the grub screw out of the feed for the turbo, the oil feed. So there's a grub screw just above the passenger side engine mount. It's just a real small little grub spill. I think it's a 5mm hex. Sit this in there. We're gonna give it a knock like we did with the other ones. Hopefully shock the threads a bit, and it should come out easily, hopefully. Oh, there we go. We got it. All right, that's good. That was another thing that I was thinking about. I was like, crap, what am I gonna do if I don't have this? Because all the hoses won't be the right length, but never mind.
Because can they be quite stuck?
Yeah, so I think it mainly comes down to people that are using an Allen key that is ever so slightly the wrong size, because from what I've heard, they're pretty forgiving. But pretty much, yeah, if you strip this out, then you have to get your oil feed from, like a lot of people tee off the pressure sender, which is where I put my sensor in. But it's just easier to get it off here. It's closer and way easier. There she is. So the grub screw that we just got out for the oil feed, so this thread is a 1/8 BSPT, so that's British Standard Pipe tapered, and that's what our fitting here for our oil feed, that's what that is on this end, 1/8 BSPT, and then on the other end we've got a 4AN fitting, which is just the size I've gone for to match the hose that I have. Mainly when that size because the flanges that I picked up for the turbo, the feed is a 4AN, so I just wanted 4AN on both ends, keep it simple. So yeah, so pretty much this will screw in where that came out of, and then that's our oil feed fitting in. So I'm just using some high pressure thread sealant just for oils, liquid, stuff like that. So I've just got a little bit on the end of the thing. They say to clean the surfaces fully before you do it, but obviously I can't clean the inside of that grub screw, it's too hard. So yeah, pretty much I'll just chuck a little bit on here and hopefully it does something. Not that I don't, because it's a tapered thread, probably doesn't really need it that much anyway, but just precaution. That's pretty tight. That should not be leaking. As part of preparation, I'm just gonna blow through all the ports on the turbo as well. Just pretty much make sure there's no shit in them. So, a test you actually can do, if you block the end, you can see how good your turbo seals are. So if you put compressed air in there, so like you'd be able to tell if you either put your hand over the end there or end there, you can see if you can feel any air.
Nah.
You can't?
None.
What about in the front?
Nah, none.
Okay, good. That's good. So, yeah, pretty much, obviously I'm not sealing that completely, but I've just got pressure on the end there, so I know that the air's coming through. Paddy can't feel any air coming out of the back or the front. So yeah, that means the turbo seal should be all right. For the water lines, a lot of people do choose to run like braided lines like you would an oil line. For this, I'm actually gonna use the factory water lines off of a factory turbo GU. So, and the way this will work is that, so these fittings, banjo bolts on the end, they bolt to the turbo, and then this is designed to run alongside the rocker cover these can be bolted to the rocker cover. And then at this end, I'm gonna, because obviously I don't have the drain for the turbo with a banjo bolt, I'm gonna cut these ends and I'm just gonna braze on a 5/16 barb, and then I'll just use hose to attach this to my T-piece for the coolant drain. And we'll be doing the same for the feed, doing the same thing. So this sits like, as you can imagine, like that sort of thing. So we're pretty much gonna be cutting that off, putting a barb on, and then I'll just be running hose back to the coolant feed at the back of the block. While we're still just putting stuff together, turbo studs, well, manifold to turbo studs, just picked these up from Troll Park. So they are a straight fit into our manifold. The original studs that were on this manifold, 2 were snapped, or 3 were snapped, 1 had damaged threads, so we had to remove them all. One of the studs we had to drill and use the easy out like we're gonna have to do for the studs in the block, so we just had to retap it, but it worked out all right anyway. One thing we have to do as part of doing water lines and things like that, we're gonna have to drop the coolant. Coolant drain bung is at the back of the block, but I'm going to try and save the coolant so I can use it again, because I reckon I've drained the coolant on this thing like more times than I've changed the oil, which is ridiculous considering coolant's meant to last like 100,000 Ks or like 500,000 Ks, something ridiculous. Anyway, so I'm gonna try to save it. So I've got a funnel, I've got a bucket, like a big bucket underneath, and I'll just do my best to guide it down. So let's see how this goes. All right, here we go. No. Oh, sort of. I spilled a tiny bit. Alright, so we just drained the coolant. So this is the coolant bung that comes out when you drain. So this is a 3/8 BSPT. I'm pretty sure it's tapered. For my coolant feed, I'm just using a 3/8 BSPT piece with a 5/16 barb on the end. So that's just, I'm just gonna run 5/16 hose to suit the water line for the turbo. So yeah, pretty much this will just be getting screwed in there, and then that's our coolant feed for the turbo. Also, while the coolant's out, I will be doing the coolant return, which is off the heater hose. I actually asked mechanic Dan, I don't know if he's gotten back, oh yeah, he has gotten back to me. Dan said, yeah, return to the, he said if you're going from one heater hose to the other, just make sure it's, yeah, one to the other. So if you picked up off the pressure side of the heater hose, the feed, then you make sure you return it to there. But because I'm picking up off the back of the block, which is the pressure, then I'll return to the heater hose return, which is this one over here. So I've got a T-piece to go in there, and that'll be the coolant return for the turbo. So yeah, pretty much we can yeah, start doing things. I don't know, I'm not sure what to do next. We're sort of waiting on the studs, but for the water temp sensor. A lot of people meant to do that off of a lot of people do it here. So essentially on the thermostat, the lower thermostat housing, there's a blank spot here on the GQs, which on the GU factory turbos is a port for temp sensor. That's where I get temperatures from. So on the GQ, it's just over here, but because the return for the GU is different, they've got it just on here. So ideally I'll drill and tap this for the water temp, but I'm not sure how much of the housing has to come off to actually get to that. So we will see, because it looks pretty in depth, TBH. Because you don't want to get it off of there, because that's always going to be hot stuff coming out of the thermostat. You want the temperature of the water inside the motor. Really, you want to do it off there. The only other thing to do is whether you could get a T-piece to tee off one of these. I think that'll work, because one of these is a temperature sensor. I can't remember which one.
And you're thinking of tapping into there?
Yeah, but I don't know how hard it is to pull all that stuff off, because obviously you can't just tap it, because you'll get all in there. So that's coolant feed in. So we'll have a bit of hose running to that, and the hose will run to the turbo. Alright, so I'm just making up our little T-piece for the coolant return. So that's the barb that I pulled out of the lower thermostat housing, which the heater hose returns into. So I've pulled that out, and I'm just putting that into the T-piece that I've got. So because this is a 3/8 BSP T fitting, so I've got a T-piece with all female 3/8 BSP T. So this screws straight into the top, pretty self-explanatory. Then as for the bottom, I've got a 3/8 BSPT to 3/8 BSPT, or just male to male adapter. So that's gonna go into the thermostat housing, and then this goes up into our T-piece. So I'll have to put some Teflon on that, stick that in. And then coming out of this other side, that'll be for our return coolant, and that's gonna go in our 5/16 barb, obviously again with a 3/8 BSPT. So that'll go in there like that. And then we'll pretty much screw that back into the thermostat housing and get it to line up where we want it, and then that's where we'll connect our return hose to.
It is a tight fit, but it will do.
See, it's jammed up again in there. It doesn't want to come any further than that.
Is that turning?
Yeah, it's tight.
Good stuff.
It's just not going to go in square.
Yeah.
It's got to be square because of...
So we got the first stud out. It actually wasn't too hard, which was good. Pretty much the issue is this other one, because it's the bottom right, so cylinder 6, and it's the bottom stud, because it's so close to the firewall, we can't get the drill in there straight to use the easy out because it clashes. And obviously you want to be able to drill a straight hole so that when you turn it, it's actually like turning the stud out. You don't just want it like, yeah, it has to be pretty much very close to straight on. Yeah, we might have to get like a right hand drill bit or something so we can get in there. So in which case we might be delayed till tomorrow. But for now, I'm gonna take the thermostat housing off so that we can drill and tap it for the water temp sensor. So just disconnecting a bunch of hoses and yeah, take that out, and then we'll show you when it's out and when we're tapping it. Good.
What are you trying to get off?
The whole thermostat hand, because I've got to drill and tap into there.
It should really be no opening all the way out.
Alright, so we just tapped the spot in the thermostat housing for the 8th MPT. So yeah, run that through, now that's in the right spot. So pretty much ready to chuck that back on the car. That's all good to go. And once that's on, then we can worry about the exhaust studs. We'll finish that off, and then we're on getting close to the home stretch. So we're gonna chuck this back on the car. Alright guys, so we've got all the boring, slow NA bits off the car. So next episode, we're going to be putting on all the goodies. We've got to have the manifold going on, the turbo's going to be going on, and we're going to give the girl its first run. Also, don't forget, we got the merch now, so if you want to pick up some merch, get your orders in now while you can. We're loving it. So yeah, we'd love it if you jump over there, picked up some merch. We're going to love seeing it on you guys. So yeah, cheers guys, see you in the next one.